Tokyo null drifting? Is that anything? Can we make a joke with that? Oh, the video's starting already? Hello folks, Phil Gallagher, aka ThrabenU here for another Legacy video, and today we're going to bust out the Nulldrifters again and try to annihilate our opponents. So Chase sent me this pretty sweet Nulldrifter Stiflenought deck list that I'm pretty excited to try out. I've made minimal changes to this one. I think the core of it is very good. Generally speaking, we are looking to cheat a 12/12 Phyrexian Dreadnought into play, and it has kind of this negative ETB trigger, but we have three different ways to dodge it. We can stifle the trigger, so it doesn't happen. We can play a dress down, maybe preferably at our opponent's end step, and then it just doesn't trigger at all when it enters the battlefield, or we can use Doorkeeper Thrull to stop the trigger from happening as well. And then Nulldrifter works in kind of a similar way. So if you are used to Nulldrifter, you can evoke this to draw two cards. A primary difference here is that this is an on-cast trigger. So for 3 mana, you always get to draw your cards. And then if you can Stifle or Dress Down or Doorkeeper Thrull, you get to keep your 4/4 flying, annihilating body around. And that's pretty cool. And we have like some amount of removal and some amount of counter spells beyond that to go and back this up. As far as the mana base goes, we've snuck in a Meticulous Archive for a little bit of value, and we've got some Wastelands, with the idea being that we don't actually need to get to like 7 mana to go and do our thing. We're going to be pretty comfortable operating on 2 or 3 mana most of the time. As far as the sideboard goes, we have a couple of neat newer cards here. Wrath of the Skies has been seeing a lot of play. I have quite liked this card. So let's ignore X for a minute. So for white, you can destroy each artifact, creature, and enchantment with mana value less than or equal to the number of energy paid for it this way. So for 2 mana, you can wipe all of the 0-cost artifacts, and for every mana you pay into it beyond that, this can become a better and better board wipe. So endgame, this can just be like, oh, I'm going to dump 6 mana into this, and I'm going to wipe everything off the board. And the other new card that we've got here is Harbinger of the Seas, which is our Blood Moon effect, but in blue. It is attached to a merfolk, so that is a downside, but otherwise this can be a good way to fight off things like Urza Sagas or otherwise incredibly greedy mana bases. I have done something that might look a little weird here. I've slotted a Path to Exile into the sideboard of our Wasteland deck, but I wanted to have a decent density of extra removal spells that I could board in versus Psychic Frog decks. I really just don't want to get got by Psychic Frog. That card is very good, and I think I need more than just 4 Swords to Plowshares as instant speed ways to deal with that card. Like, even some of the combo decks are adopting it as a pivot plan, so I think having 3 ways to deal with that in the sideboard, as well as some amount of graveyard hate, might make my Riskaminator matchup at least bearable. So yeah, why don't we go ahead and hop into the matches here, try to annihilate some people. Should you need any of these new Modern Horizons cards, or I guess we're already going to start getting into like Bloomborough spoiler season pretty soon, consider checking out toamagic.com and using promo code ThrabenU to save 5% when you do. You always get free shipping on any order, and that sounds pretty great to me for an online order. Let's battle. I am not super excited about this first hand. It's kind of generic. I have multiple pieces of the same side of my combo. I have a cantrip, but not a guarantee that that cantrip will be good. I need just a little bit more information than just Bobble to get a read on my opponent's deck. Like, this could be a DRC deck. This could be a like 8-cast deck. We're probably in the general Delver ballpark. So my goal is to stifle this Polluted Delta. That is my preferred way to use my mana at this time. I might end up stifling an opposing Wasteland. Got it. Bam, bam, bam. No days here. No island at all. It is an underground sea. I'm going to wasteland that. Probably during my opponent's upkeep. Boop. Alright. Got it. No fight back. And, I can daze the next thing that happens as well. I'd prefer not to go back on my land drop because I would love to brainstorm plus fetch, but I'll daze a critter that comes into play. Yeah, so I will float mana and just daze that. And I can't be dazed back. I don't think I am going to brainstorm here. Fantastic. I'm just going to replay a Tundra, call it a turn. New bauble. If I start reaching the mid game without taking a bunch of damage, I'm probably pretty heavily favored to win. Alright, my opponent can draw their card at my upkeep. Alright, so end of turn, my turn. I have a clear plan. I am just going to play out the Tundra because I am likely to pitch Brainstorm to Force of Will, so I'm just going to save this fetch land for later. I guess the next question beyond this is, do I wait another turn cycle to play around days, giving up a lot in terms of tempo to do so? That's fine. Alright, there's the fetch land to clear, and we are chilling. I think I'm okay casting this. This just feels so very replaceable. And if my opponent intends to answer this with a lightning bolt, I can still just cast Nulldrifter, draw my 2 cards, and not keep the body around, and that's okay. It's good enough to get a response. So it's not red for lightning bolt. The brainstorm's fine. Alright, Thrull's in play. I'm going to go ahead and make my attack here. Opponent goes to 16. And then let's do the fun thing. I'm just going to pick up an island here and leave the Tundra in deck. Yeah, so notice that this is an on-cast trigger. Oh, yeah. I think I'm just going to fight over this. I'm going to pitch the Brainstorm in case this goes away. Yeah, I just think with my opponent having a single land in play after dazing, that it's just perfectly fine to use my Force of Will. I don't care about Murktide Regent. I'll just, like, Swords to Plowshare it, or heal through it, or annihilate it. We've got a new fetch land. So the Psychic Togs and Murktide Regents of the world can come down now. Seems like Murktide. And that's totally fine. Good God. Yeah. So, swords target Murktide. This annihilates a land and deals 5 damage. This is disgusting. Yeah. Opponent's at 16. I'll drop a Dreadnought on top of that. I can keep my opponent off of black, and I have removal for their next creature beyond that. This deck feels strong, just first impression. So, I don't hate additional removal. I think on the draw, I'm going to go ahead and get rid of Daze. Go +3 removal spells that get rid of the early, like, DRCs and Psychic Frogs, and then maybe fill with one of these cards. I do not know yet whether or not my opponent is on Reanimator nonsense. Gut says no. And skimming some of the recent Grixis lists, it looks like indeed the answer is no. Yeah, I think I'm going to fill with this card while I am on the draw, and my dazes aren't particularly strong. I could also go down the Force of Wills. Like, traditionally, you often don't want to be a Force of Will and Swords to Plowshares deck at the same time. I think within the context of this shell, where I am almost a combo deck in some capacities, keeping Force of Will to help shove through my combo is okay. I just kind of have to keep in mind that, like, Pyroblasts are a thing. This is a perfectly fine but unexciting hand. If I draw another land, I can potentially just play the beginning of this game on basics, which I would be perfectly happy to do. Especially since they're targeting themselves with that. Form their decision about fetch lands. So do they like their card is the question. They do like their card. So they get to draw. If they want to play around my Stifle, they can fetch right now. They did not. I think I'm just gonna pass the turn and try to snag that land. We've got a Volk. If it just goes around to my turn, I will just happily wasteland that. Despite the fact that it is leaving me lower on lands. So, upkeep. Attempt to take out Volk. I'll respond. I'm going to get my basic here, despite the fact that it'll knock me off Path to Exile. Bam. Now, things can get a little weird here with an opposing Daze. There's floating blue. Yeah, so there is the Daze. So the Daze means that my Wasteland has been countered because the Volk is now in hand. And I just decide if I want to go deep on stopping my opponent's lands here. I don't think I do. I think I'm just going to accept that exchange of resources and keep my Force of Will for something like a Murktide Regent or Psychic Frog that would be harder to beat. So our stack will clear. We'll see if my opponent can drop something like a Psychic Frog. That we Force of Will. Pitching a Brainstorm. I want to be able to ponder and dig deep for a white land if this gets dazed or whatever. It does get dazed. I have become more and more impressed by this card as time goes on. This was not something that I thought was particularly strong during spoiler season. I am going to take both of these. I am going to try to get rid of this before my opponent untaps. If they got the third Daze, they got the third Daze. Alright, so now do you have a basic? No basic. So now my game plan is draw that third land off the top, just start using Nulldrifters as draw twos until I can assemble my own game plan. If my opponent does something aggressive and I can't just take a turn off to Nulldrifter, I will Brainstorm looking for like a Swords to Plowshares type card to answer whatever creature my opponent plays out. A Wasteland is another good reason to have kept a land on top. When do I cast this Brainstorm? And do I play this land prior to doing it? I think I do. I think it's just a little awkward. I would like to be able to ponder afterwards. If I hit a better fetch land than this, I could get, well, oh god, I could get multiple basics. I'm going to put back both Dreadnoughts, I think, and keep the things that can just give me card advantage. And end of my opponent's turn, I can go for Meticulous Archive unless my opponent plays out a Wasteland and just floats it there. Alright, do I have a Psychic Frog to worry about? No, it's a counterbalance. Sure. I don't think that is that big of a deal here. This is a great card in the matchup that is not currently good. I'm just going to go ahead and put that into my graveyard because I very, very badly want to hit this next land drop. Now, the Nulldrifters are not blue cards, so I can't pitch them to Force of Will. They have blue color identity for things like Commander. That's it. That's probably fine. The Surveil plus Counterbalance stuff can be a little bit obnoxious. I don't think I'm responding here. I might Brazen Borrower one of these things out of the way at end of turn. And we've immediately got a new fetch land. Let's just try to make them redeploy this. I don't expect there to be a 2 on top of the library, because that's basically just Daze. Oh no, Psychic Frog, I forgot about that. Okay. Whatever, I'll just start drawing 2 cards. I imagine my opponent will keep their Psychic Frog. And then this is the part of the game where those Swords to Plowshare type cards start looking good again. That stuff's not the best. It's a little hard to set up Nulldrifter Stifle through Counterbalance. So at 4 mana, Wrath of the Skies could be an answer to a Counterbalance while also still having game versus DRC and Psychic Frog. So I guess that's a thing to be thinking about for post-sideboard games. This is awkward because like this is exactly the sort of thing that I would like to do. But Counterbalance, I guess we're still just shoving. Hope to get a little lucky. My opponent also probably needs to pick up their pace of play or they're pretty likely to time out if we go to a game 3. Right, my opponent chose not to use their ability. I will attempt to stifle my trigger. There could still be a 1 on top. Like, it's perfectly reasonable to not respond. So this is a little annoying here. Because, like, this, like, between the Surveil and the Fetch land, there's a decent chance that... Okay, that just bottomed. There is a decent chance that my opponent can just stop this Stifle, even without a counterspell. I think I am going to Force of Will the Brainstorm and kind of put all my eggs in one basket here. But, like, this gives another counterbalance trigger, so, like, it's very awkward, because my opponent can look at their top card. I guess they already know it. They could look the first time off the Dreadnought one, they just chose not to reveal. Yeah. Or no, there was Delta that was put away with DRC. My opponent can still, like, get a Surveil land. Ah, fuck. And end up stopping my thing relatively easily. Alright, they junk another land. Now this Brainstorm resolves. It is incredibly unlikely that my whole Stifle plan works now. So here's the counterbalance trigger. Oh my god, they don't have it. What did you pitch to Force of Negation? Psychic Frog. Okay. They did not choose a Surveil land. And there's a Force of Will. Did I win that fight? It does not feel like I should have, under any circumstances, have won that fight. Raisin Bar? No. Okay. I mean, we take those, but my opponent got to look at a very large number of cards there. So at a minimum, they should probably have 12. Or, no, more than that. A minimum of 16. I guess 15 if a DRC is showing. There's like 4 Ponder, Brainstorm, Lightning Bolt, DRC kind of at the minimum. There might be some like Spell Pierce, Fatal Push type cards beyond that. I could still just get clocked out by Murktide Regent here, assuming my opponent casts this spell in a way that leaves this a 3/3 and gets to attack me for 11 next turn. So this is 8/9 as of right now. I mean, I'm either dead next turn or I'm not. Those are the two choices. Let's see which it is. I'm going to continue progressing my game so that I am more likely to actually win the game next turn. But sometimes by casting this, I make it easier for my opponent to win, because they can, like, daze, get another Surveil trigger, put extra cards into the graveyard. Alright, there is a Force of Negation revealed. Sure. So this is notably a flying blocker for If That Matters. Okay, so my opponent can now grab a Surveil land. Is there just not a Surveil land in their deck? That seems crazy. So I am dead to Lightning Bolt, or I am dead to, like, instant and sorcery hitting the graveyard, or like instant into Surveil a creature. Seems like my opponent has another Murktide Regent. There's not instants and sorceries leaving the graveyard here. So that is not going to grow the first Murktide Regent. Okay, opponent is just leaving everything back here. 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. Yeah, I mean, I'll attack in. Yeah, let's go. So I always want to kill the big one, and then I always want to kill DRC since that provides additional selection. I think that's the way that I want to do this. I am probably getting everything, though. Yep, that feels good. And then I think I want the ability to cast both of these spells into Nulldrifter rather than knocking my opponent off of Underground Sea. At this point, there's also just physically no way that my opponent can win 2 games in 3 minutes, given the pace of play that they are playing at, so I'm good with this. I'm going to cast Dress down first, I think, as my counterbalance check. It is a Pyroblast on top. I'm okay casting this while I know counterbalance does not counter it. My opponent's last card could be a Daze. I wouldn't super care about that. Well, there's not going to be a 7-drop on top, that's for damn sure. I think I'm going to play this. Yeah. I think I just leave the counterbalance in play because it eats up more of my opponent's clock. Okay, no, they gave up. GG's.
Today's video is sponsored by Moxfield.com, and honestly, they're just the best at what they do. If you need to keep your deck lists online, this is the way to do it. They have all sorts of different viewing options. You can condense that text if you like things to be tight. You can make them visual grids. You can put them in stacks. You've got all sorts of different ways to kind of view and visualize your deck lists. And they also have some really cool functionality, like allowing you to see playtest hands and even fully playtest your decks. So check them out.
So I have kept my opening hand here. My opponent is mulliganing relatively aggressively. I would say my hand is solid but unexciting. We've got a Force of Will for if my opponent is on a Necrodominance deck or Oops All Spells or something like that. Just land and pass. I think I Tundra Ponder. It opens me up to Wasteland. How many of these do I want? Am I willing to draw 2 lands, given what the rest of this looks like? I'd really rather find either more counter magic or more stuff to go with Dress Down. I don't think I want to draw 2 lands. Oops, all Dress Downs. My internal deckometer is pointing closer to combo than a Wasteland deck right now. I think I am just gonna pass the turn here. I could Brainstorm now in an attempt to find a Ponder to cast immediately. Until I know a little bit more about what's going on, I think I'm just gonna leave my mana open. I will probably do an end of turn Brainstorm. That's an unfair land for sure. This is one that has not seen a lot of play in recent years. We just have more rainbow land options now than we used to. I'm going to Brainstorm and probably eliminate some number of Dress Downs from my hand. Yeah, let's get rid of 2 Dress Downs here, and I am going to fetch in my own upkeep. Can probably safely get Tundra. I did not want to drop my own Stifle, just in case if you were wondering why I did that. Let's cast a spell. That goes on bottom. I'm gonna go bam, bam, no shuffle, make land drop. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Let's put the Force of Will into my hand. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Okay, we've got a pretty safe hand, and I can just do an end of my opponent's turn Brazen Borrower. I'm just gonna take that. Until I know what deck exactly I am playing against, I don't know whether or not that Stifle trigger would be doing something more powerful. For example, I could stifle a Storm trigger with that. Your Thoughtseize resolves. You can see what's going on over here. It's a lot. I have lost 1 Force of Will. So I am just going to make my land drop, pass the turn. I'm going to get rid of the stop on my own upkeep. My current intention is end of my opponent's turn, Brazen Borrower. That's a little awkward. I think I'm letting it happen. Opponent reveals a Lotus Petal. So no, they have Petal, Petal, Unknown, Unknown. Let's get my threat going. The threat matters for if my opponent is a Necrodominance deck. I will archive. I'm not interested in that land. So currently I have Force of Will plus a Daze as my interaction. I think I am going to just try to dig a little deeper here. I might hit a Stifle. I did. So now, is that Stifle better served on this Nulldrifter or on an opposing Storm Trigger? I think a Storm Trigger, but I'm a little unsure about that. I could have used Swords to Plowshares to gain 4 life there, but that drops the Stifle mana, which I don't think is a thing that I want to do. All right, it begins. That is Stifleable. I think I let that resolve, oddly. Can only be activated during your turn. Can dress down into Dreadnought immediately. Then still have... Let me confirm what I have. So I will have Stifle, Force of Will, pitch a blue card, and a Daze remaining. So that's all fine. And I am threatening a kill next turn. Play Dreadnought. But now that I drew a dress down, I actually have 2 dazes available. I'm not going to bite on that. So now there's a good chance that my opponent tries to use Wishclaw Talisman to shuffle from the Brainstorm, and then I stifle that as a starting point. I could consider dazes here to just preemptively tap down some of this stuff. Would matter for colors. Yeah, could matter for colors. My opponent pays with Gemstone Mine. And we'll do the same thing one more time. My opponent pays. At this point, I think if I Force of Will this, I don't lose from these resources. So then we'll just go ahead and take that out. Use 4 cards to counter a Dark Ritual while just eating up the rest of the mana. And then I don't think my opponent overcomes this. Yeah, there is the concession. Still had the Stifle for if they had gone for the activation off some LED line or something. Okay, so I never want this. I always want those. I always want this. Never want that. Never want that. The rest of this stuff is like technically playable. I think the thing that I'm most excited about Dress Down for is the fact that it is a blue card that pitches the Force of Will and Force of Negation. This is sort of interesting versus something like an Empty the Warrens pivot. Haven't seen Beseeches yet. Some amount of this stuff is probably okay. I'm going to start on a Surgical and then think about how much deeper I want to go. There's so few Storm results right now. It's a little hard to know exactly what my opponent is doing. It looks like they're almost playing closer to traditional Ant. This hand's perfectly fine. Again, it is relevant that Nulldrifter is not a blue card for these force effects. Am I going to get Thought Seized? I am. Opponent's first land is not wastelandable. It's super weird to me that they are going for multiple basic lands while also doing Gemstone Mine. I mean, there must be some strain in the sideboard for some effect or something. I lose the Force of Negation. I think I am just playing a land and passing the turn. Okay, opponent does not have another land drop. That's great. That means they're not cantripping. So I think I am fine to ponder. I would love to find a fetch land. Yep. Let's do this. I'll pass the turn. If my opponent does not play a fetch land, I will get Meticulous Archive at the end of my turn. That is a Bayou. So end of turn. Let's just do a little surveilling. I don't need that land. This is fine. I will just pass the turn, wasteland my opponent. Hand's a little clunky right now. Hopefully that ends up being fine. So my opponent's hand looks very bad from this side of the table, but they were willing to keep this hand, and they mulliganed aggressively in game 1. So they may be like very, very close to just going off. So do I just put the 12-12 in play? If I do, I drop Stifle. I still have Force of Will Daze available. I think I don't want to drop Stifle. I think I will just do this over 2 turns. I think I just want to respect my opponent's resources maximally here. Get my cantrip. Fantastic. So I can now have 3 layers of protection available. I don't think I'm going to get greedy here. I think I'm just going to do one of these and take that as a 2-turn clock. Sacrifice the Dress Down. I even have a Stifle for Boseiju. If my opponent has something like that to get rid of my Dreadnought. Ponder shuffles. I don't want this many Nulldrifters. So if I cast one and I hit a land, I end up in about the same position as I am now. I think I'm just not going to take the risk. I'm not going to drop that Stifle. Yeah, there's another basic. All right. Yeah, it's really awkward that these are colorless, because if they're not colorless, I can probably just ponder on my turn in an attempt to hit something like a Deafening Silence. That is a Beseech the Mirror, but no artifact with it. So the card is just going to hand. Okay. Opponent has made their land drop. They don't have black mana showing anymore. Brainstorm's fine. It feels like I win unless I mess up. Yes. It seems like I attack that. Like that just seems like a very good force of will spot. I can daze first to play around something like a Flusterstorm. I think with this. So let's just bounce this island. My opponent dazes. And then I'll go ahead and stop the Dark Ritual. Alright, seems like we navigated that one pretty well. Alright, I have a turn 2 Phyrexian Dreadnought backed by Force of Will. I have Force of Will for Chalice of the Void, which is one of the biggest things that I could possibly care about from whatever Devourer of Destiny deck my opponent is playing. It could be an Eldrazi aggro deck, it could just be an Eldrazi ramp deck. Cards that go to exile will probably let me know that. I'm somewhat likely to just play Wasteland on turn 1 and not expose my Tundra to Wasteland unless I draw another blue source for turn. Alright, 2 Chalices in exile. I love seeing that. And we've got an Eye of Ugin. I would love to draw a land. I did not. So, if I don't Wasteland Eye of Ugin, my opponent could play Thought-Knot Seer and take my Phyrexian Dreadnought, and then the rest of my hand is pretty mediocre. But I can just Force of Will. It can't come down off of Cavern. I think I'm just going to play Wasteland and pass. Well, my opponent is sitting there and thinking about this, so Wasteland pass has confused them. We have a free Once Upon a Time. Playing Once Upon a Time plus Devourer of Destiny in the same deck is a lot of free selection. And that's sort of a neat deck building idea. Yavimaya. This is an on-cast trigger or an Eldrazi Temple. You've got it. I'm not going to counter that body. That I do counter. Force of Will, pitching one of the Ponders. Yeah, just being cognizant of how important Thought-Knot Seer is. That's a disgusting draw. Oh my god. Alright. Bam. Bam. Stifle my trigger. And notably, this is a colorless creature, so Devourer of Destiny is not going to be able to junk that. And my opponent can start casting stuff of that size this turn. Right, this is effectively a tri-land right now because of Yavimaya, so 3, 4, 5, 6. Any other land is 7. My opponent really needs a Cavern of Souls, though. I'm going to try to hold this Force of Will for something better than Once Upon a Time. It is an Ancient Tomb. Is this the one that makes mana dorks? When you cast it and when it dies, 0/1 thingy-mabob. You got it. Yeah, you can have that. I'm not quite ready for that. So in comes my 12/12. My opponent is at 8. I don't cast Ponder. I need the blue card for Force of Will. 2, 4, 5, maybe 6 or 7. I think I'm going to just Wasteland Eye of Ugin. It is essentially a triple land here. That keeps me off of Doorkeeper Thrull into another Dreadnought, but I'm just hoping that this 12/12 is good enough. Cavern of Souls is the scariest thing here, where my opponent just drops that, negates my Force of Will, and then shoves a large body through, or triple blocks Phyrexian Dreadnought to take it out. Alright, my opponent went into the tank for a little while. Let's see what they've come up with. Having Ancient Tomb for green, it looks like. Ooh, Kozilek's Command. That's real good here, but the second Force of Will is pretty dumb. There's another Ancient Tomb beyond that. My opponent has to just soak up some life this turn. So I send in for 12. My opponent's at 8 life. They're going to throw some bodies in front of this to stay alive. Their Yavimaya is incredibly important right now to keep these Ancient Tombs as functional lands. So they get 1 Eldrazi spawn back. So they have what? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Yeah, they can cast a 7-drop, but this does not exile this spell. Yep. I potentially just lose that one if I don't have 2 Force of Wills there. I drag the game on, at which point, like, I maybe hit another land drop and just do another Dreadnought or 2, but, you know. So, making lands worse and not produce colored mana sounds very good. Wrath of the Skies is something to clear Chalice out while potentially being a late game board wipe could be a thing. Path to Exile is probably actively good. Prismatic Ending for Chalice is maybe okay. I don't think I need to go Force of Negation deep. It feels like my Nulldrifters are very slow in this matchup, but the Nulldrifters are something that don't eat it to Kozilek's Command or a similar spell. I think Daze is awkward enough that I'll get rid of that. That gives me 1, 2, 3. I might fill the deck with that. That seems okay. I would strongly, strongly prefer aggressive hands rather than controlling hands. That gets a nope from me. I cannot cast any cantrips here. This needs another land, but otherwise is the sort of thing that I am looking for. I can Force of Will pitching Dress down if my opponent casts a Chalice on turn 1, which they did. So I will get rid of it. I really wanted to draw another land here. Casting an end of turn Brainstorm on my opponent's turn is going to have a real degree of risk. We thought nodding. No, it is Glaring Fleshraker. I boarded Days out. My opponent has 1 floating anyway. Yes, that resolves. I'm going to risk the Brainstorm here. I think my game just works out so much better if I cast Doorkeeper Thrull on my next turn into Dreadnought the following turn. I can't really do that in a way that hides a card on top. I can get rid of one of these. I could just get rid of the Thrall and just Dreadnought Stifle immediately. Okay, let's do that. I'll get a new Tundra and do the thing. A Kozilek's command from my opponent will be really good here, because they could exile the Dreadnought and make a bunch of mana that also does me damage. I think that's the thing that I have to dodge here. Okay, we have Mana Ramp Neuter. Now these are going to deal damage to me with the Fleshraker. So I go to 14 relatively quickly. Again, my opponent's Yavimaya is doing a lot towards keeping them alive. I think I'm gonna Brainstorm now. Ooh. Yeah. Bam, bam, bam. Combat. Swing in. My opponent needs to block some amount of this. And maybe we can get tricky with Path to Exile for a kill here. Or no, my opponent's at 14. JK, JK. Yes, so this is fine. My opponent goes to 5. I think I'm going to go ahead and hit this with a removal spell before I take that extra ping damage. I think it's Swords. Yeah, I think it's Swords. We're kind of in the same boat as last turn, where Kozilek's command is pretty damning. Otherwise, I'm in very good shape. Seems like they don't have it, or they would have snapped it off already. There's an Eye of Ugin. My opponent activating that? They are. Go on. Wastscape Battle Mage. They don't have the mana for it because they require colorless mana specifically. So, if I had given my opponent a waste by casting Path to Exile, it's possible my opponent stabilizes there. Okay, we are playing against a Yorion deck of some kind. I kind of have 3 same size pieces of the deck. I'm just going to assume that a Brainstorm at some point saves my ass. Okay, it seems like it is actual factual death and taxes. How many basics do I have? 3? 3. Got it. I can't Thrall into Nulldrifter with current hand. Now I have my colors. Double Ghost Quarter. Awkward. I'm just going to make a land drop and pass with the intention of doing Doorkeeper Thrull. Cycle Timeless Dragon. Do I stifle that? My opponent has showed me 2 colorless sources. I think I stifle that. My opponent can potentially ghost quarter their own land to convert it into a plains. Alright, that's a Yori into hand. I'm just gonna draw. Deck's perfect. Yeah. So I'll go basic. Actually, in the face of triple ghost quarter, maybe I just Tundra now. Leave both my lands in there. I will Doorkeeper Thrull into hope my opponent does not have Solitude. They do not. Fantastic. Alright, white mana is on the table. I lose the Dreadnought. That's fine. Opponent not willing to immediately go after my mana. I have some interesting plays that I can legally make. I think let's do some cantripping. This stuff's not the best. I'm gonna put back a Stifle, I think. Put back a Stifle and a Force of Will. Cast a new Ponder to shuffle. Yeah. I've picked up a Daze. That's just a card that pitches to my Force of Will. That's perfectly fine. I'm gonna attack for my 1. I'm not going to wasteland the Caracas because my opponent can then ghost quarter their Caracas to turn it into a basic plains. I'm just going to leave up cast a second Doorkeeper Thrull. There's an opposing wasteland. That is not going to trigger. Resolves. Yep. So here's the insurance policy. That's not the best for me. I'll go ahead and just crash on in. Opponent's at 17. I'll pass the turn. I can hard cast a Force of Will. An Elite Spellbinder. That's a 3/1 that's not going to trigger. Resolves. Would you like to attack? Nope. So I believe that I am into Meticulous Archive. Any selection here is just absurd. No. And all Sword's the thing that can block my flyers. Get out. Now, any cantrip, Dreadnought, Nulldrifter is insane. The Force of Wills are great as long as I still have 5 lands. As soon as we start kind of going to war on each other's lands, the Force of Wills get worse quickly. I don't know my opponent's hand, but I'm almost certain that they are playing this game wrong. Like, they have options to obliterate my lands. They have options to ghost quarter their own lands to get white. I'm just going to play that out. Yep, and I'll just kind of continue doing the love taps. Opponent's at 16. Still no plays. Yep. And I've got a swords now to boot. Send it. Death by 1,000 cuts. That is a Felia. I'm going to let that resolve and just swords it before it has Caracas protection. Yeah, just nope. 16. Alright, so my opponent wants the white here. That's hardcast Yorion. I will hardcast Force of Will. Get out. Which means that I can just hardcast Force of Will again next turn. And the Recruiter of the Guard gives me a love tap on a turn where I can't flash in something. Brainstorm's absurdly good. Just anything that produces a Dreadnought or a Nulldrifter here puts me so far ahead. Yeah, so put back 2. 1, 2, 3. Cast Nulldrifter to draw 2. And my opponent says, no, I've had enough. So I am probably looking at this sort of stuff here. Doorkeeper Thrull is just absolutely absurd in this matchup. My Dreadnoughts are somewhat easy to remove because my opponent is just going to be on white removal. I think I am going to keep Force of Will. Again, kind of leaning into that combo-y side of my deck a little bit. That gives me these. And then I could cut one more thing for one more prismatic ending. I think I'm going to try this, though. With 1 blue land, this hand is perfectly fine. It's not playable as is. Upside for keeping is pretty high if I just draw another land. I think I keep this and get rid of Wrath of the Skies for being hard to cast on a 1-lander. But Doorkeeper Thrull is an absurd magic card in this matchup. I might need to force that. It's awkward because of something like turn 2 Stoneforge Mystic for Kaldra is quite good. This is a lot of advantage over time if I stumble. I go ahead and say no. That's uncastable. Okay. Tapped land. Okay. It seems like I'm more likely to see the Swords to Plowshares, Path to Exile type cards from my opponent here currently. Alright, need a second land. Second land, put on top. I will play that and pass the turn. And honestly, I wouldn't say no to third land either. That is resolving. So end of turn. Pick up a Tundra. Cast a Thrull. I would love third land or blue card. Third land. This has flash. I'll do my little love tap for 1 here. Opponent's at 19. I cast Phyrexian Dreadnought. My opponent could Swords to Plowshares Doorkeeper Thrull in response, and then I play a second Doorkeeper Thrull afterwards. So I still end up with my 12/12, and my opponent does not actually remove the Dreadnought with the Swords to Plowshares. Other runes is a-okay with me. This Dreadnought is going to smack my opponent to death in 2 turns. And yeah, no, that's it. I believe I am now 4-0 and I have not lost a single game. Alright, let's see if we can put up a trophy. Oh, that's an awkward one. It just does nothing if I miss the land drop. This is how I miss my trophy. We'll go to 5. We'll go to 4. So 1, 2, 3. Alternatively, I try to cheese this game because I'm not going to win in a fair way, and I just try to go Stifle, Wasteland, and hope my opponent does not play Magic. That might be a better plan. Now, I sure as fuck don't feel good about that, but that might be what I'm working with here, and just like kind of lean on the fact that a very large number of blue decks, I'm going to go Basic Island, play a low land count, and if I can keep them off of the initial cantrips, like maybe they don't play Magic, and I can hide the Wasteland for a turn cycle too. Fuck yeah. Fetch again. I think not. And I will Surveil land here, I think. It kind of sucks that I am going to need 2 cards in order to really do whatever my plan is. I will show the Wasteland. Damn it. I guess I'm afraid of DRC coming down. That's a ponder. I will almost certainly Wasteland this Volcanic Island and just, like, stay on course. My opponent did keep their stuff. I'm always going to do this, just every single time. Let's not give my opponent a daze target to protect their land. That's a Force of Will. You got it. Yeah, so that is, unfortunately for me, 4 land drops in a row after I answered 3 of them. And that is what it is. You know, we're on a mulligan to 4. But I think what I did gave me a very real chance at staying in this game. And maybe I am still in this game. I don't think I am. Sure. Yeah, no, that's a lot of pressure. Yikes. Alright. I am going to continue playing the game as I am playing for a trophy. Flips to Lightning Bolt. That's very bad in terms of my chances of actually winning this. I am only taking 4 this turn, I guess. Sure. So Force of Will is live until my opponent wastelands me. Sure. Surveil land does not buff that. I'm taking 4. Well, I'll do that. There's an on-cast draw 2. Ooh. So I can respond to my stuff here. This is probably just going to accomplish getting the Lightning Bolt. Is it better for me to Swords to Plowshares, actually? I guess they both save 3 life. The Swords to Plowshares going to happen next turn anyway. So there's the Lightning Bolt. So that I don't get to keep my Nulldrifter. I'm probably dead to another Lightning Bolt. My opponent is keeping their cards, which is horrifying for me. Sure, sure. Okay, there's a bobble to graveyard. So now I need another answer to one of these creatures. Okay, great. I'm at 1. Well, that's a redraw towards something relevant. Draw a card. That won't do it. Yeah, so I can remove 1 creature and then still die. Put up a hell of a fight for a mulligan that deep. So I have a pile of potential removal that I can be thinking about, and I can also think about this as a just I win the game button. I don't think I'm the biggest fan of returning my lands to hand here. That is going to get me these 3 removal spells, and I think a Hydroblast. Maybe 1 Harbinger. It's possible I should just keep Daze when I am on the play. No, absolutely not. This is unexciting, but fine. I probably won't keep the Force of Will after mulliganing. And I'm just going to go land, pass, give myself the opportunity to stifle a land drop. Can't stifle that one. Is a Tameo. Yes. Bobble's fine. I think I'm going to surveil land and play my removal spell around a Daze. It is another land. That's unexciting to me unless I get wastelanded. Okay, so you can see what I'm drawing. I'm not going to stifle that or anything. The opponent knows that I have a Brainstorm. I think I'm just going to path this now. My opponent does have the basic. I think at this point I am not stifling a fetch land. Daze is fine. Opponent draws their card for Bobble. Delver's fine. Second Delver is a little scary. Where did I fall on Wrath of the Skies? I left it in the board. Nulldrifter is okay. I need a little bit more mana to get to that. Bam. 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 Pass. Sometimes I can ambush Delver mid-combat. So Brainstorm. So I eat a lot of damage here. Sure. End of turn. I believe I do Dress Down over the Thrull. This one can be Pyroblast, but this one can be Lightning Bolted. This one also just gets me a little bit deeper. It is a Daze. That is very unfortunate for me. I can just play Nulldrifter as a draw 2 and then try to like draw a Swords to Plowshares to take out one of these. Or I can do Doorkeeper Thrull into Nulldrifter next turn. I think the immediacy matters here. I could also just draw a Stifle. Oh, that hurts. So we missed on Stifle, Swords, Brainstorm, Ponder, Dreadnought. Yeah, no, that's rough. I'm at 6. Oh my god, deck. Come on. Come on. I'm dead to a Lightning Bolt or any removal spell. Or honestly, probably any counter spell. Alright. So I need to draw Nulldrifter specifically. Okay, I mean, that was like 5 lands on top of the deck at the end there. We still had a great 4-1 league, and we saw what it took at the end for us not to come out ahead. Okay, if I'm being honest, this feels like one of the better Stiflenought decks that I've ever played. The fact that, like, this is draw 2 on cast, and that you can draw into a Doorkeeper Thrull or Stifle to keep it around is really powerful. I was a little skeptical of the Wastelands at first, but Wasteland combined with Stifle gives you a way to get out of the early game and get to the point where you can get some of this stuff set up. You just have the ability to get relatively deep in your deck. You have 12 things in your deck that cantrip, not counting the Nulldrifters, 16 if you count the Nulldrifters. So if you have a good sideboard card, you have a decent chance at finding it. This is going to randomly get wins versus things like Death and Taxes, where your opponents just don't get to play Magic. And Stifle is a weird degree of flexibility. It's not a particularly good Magic card, generally speaking, but when it also can just let you cheat a 12-12 into play, while also, stopping a storm trigger or a critical Aether Vial activation or save your land from a wasteland. It does a lot. Base, this deck felt sweet. Generally speaking, I liked it. I was a little bit unsure about some of my sideboarding. The Path to Exile that I added, I felt like that was very good. I was a little on the fence about how and when I should be sideboarding in Wrath of the Skies. It was a little weird in this deck because, like, you're a Wasteland deck, so you're going down on lands. You can't funnel as much into the X cost, but I still think I like it. The Hydroblast probably felt like the most expendable card in the sideboard to me. That maybe doesn't mean it shouldn't be there, but it maybe was the weakest card in the sideboard for this specific league. Yeah, but like two thumbs up for this one. This one felt sweet, and I had a ton of fun playing this one. So, Chase, thank you very much for supporting my channel by doing this donation deck list. Folks, I hope you have a wonderful rest of the day. Should you need magic cards, you know where to go. Promo code ThrabenU to let them know that I sent you. And remember, if you want to see one of your decks on the channel because you have a terrible brew or a sweet brew or a good brew, whatever, donation deck list information is available in every video description. All right, folks, have a wonderful rest of the day. See ya!